couldn't even keep time, man. Fire that guy. Fire that guy. Well, as I said before, since Easter we've been going through the book of Acts. We're going to continue to do that today. We're up to Acts 12 because I think it's important because in the book of Acts we see the people being the church. You know, all through the Gospels are talking about Jesus and what he's done and how he's our Redeemer and our Savior. And then in the book of Acts we start talking about the people that are the first century church. And the apostles and the different people that have come along as followers of Christ. And last week we talked about how they started in Jerusalem, but now they've moved on to Antioch. And Antioch is a Greek stronghold city. So there's Romans and Greeks, some Jewish people there. But it's not the strong Jewish population that we see in Jerusalem. And Antioch is the first place where followers of Jesus have taken on the name of being Christians. Christianos. So it's kind of a turning point in the church. Now they're still being persecuted by the Jewish authorities. And they're still being persecuted by the Roman authorities, you know, because the Romans see them as a bunch of troublemakers because the Jewish establishment has said, well, they're causing all this trouble and the Romans are trying to keep the peace because they want to rule over everybody. So, because of this, people are getting put in jail, people are getting killed. So as we pick up now in Acts 12, it says, now about this time, Herod the king laid hands on some who belonged to the church in order to mistreat them. Now this is not the same Herod that we see in Jesus' time, okay, in Jesus' birth. This is Herod Agrippa the First. This is like the grandson or the son. And he's the one that's in charge now. So he put them in, you know, the ones that belong to the church in order to mistreat them. So they're not just putting them in jail, they're beating them up. And he had James, the brother of John, and John is one of the first disciples, right? And his brother James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. So he just killed him straight up. You know, and he did this because he's trying to make the Jewish people happy. He's trying to, what they call, appease them or make them happy. But when he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. Now it was during the days of unleavened bread. Now these are holy days that are very important to the Jewish people. And it's around the time of Passover. I think it's right before Passover. And so he's not going to be like executing anybody during these holy days. So he takes Peter and he puts him in jail. Now during the days of unleavened bread, right? And when he had seized him, he put him in prison, delivering him to 4 squads of soldiers. Not just 4 soldiers, 4 squads of soldiers. That's probably about a dozen men each, right? To guard him, intending after the Passover to bring him out before the people. In other words, to bring him out before the people and to execute him. So Peter was kept in prison, but the prayer for him was being made fervently by the church of God. Now these were the people these were the Christians at the time, and they, you know, all they knew to do was pray. They couldn't go up against the, you know, Herod or the Romans or the Jewish establishment. So they were praying for him. You know, oh God, deliver Peter. Oh God, deliver Peter. And they're praying for him fervently, heavily. And on the very night when Herod was about to bring him forward, see, he's been in jail for a while now and been in prison. Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains, and guards in the front of the door were watching over the prison. So now, you not only have 4 squads of soldiers watching over him, he's sleeping between 2 soldiers, and he's handcuffed to them, and he's got soldiers on the door. Now, the reason Herod did this is because, see, God has already delivered some people out of prison before, and Herod's aware of this. So he's trying to make doubly sure that nothing happens to this Peter guy. He wants to make sure. He's got him chained to these people in the middle of the prison. He's got him watching over the door, and he's got 4 squads of soldiers all around him and guards all around him. I mean, this dude's heavily guarded, right? And behold, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared, and a light shone in the cell where Peter was. And he struck Peter's side, in other words, he nudged him pretty hard, and roused him, saying, "Get up quickly." And his chains fell off his hands. In other words, Peter's handcuffs just fell off. His shackles just fell off right there. And when they fell off, it didn't even wake up the 2 soldiers who were guarding him on either side. And the angel said to him, "Gird yourself." In other words, tie a wrap around yourself. And the angel said, "Gird yourself and put on your sandals." And so he did. So Peter did. And he said to him, "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me." So in other words, he's got this little diaper, better words, around him. He's got his sandals, and now he puts his cloak on, and the angel's saying, "Follow me." And he went out and continued to follow, and he did not know what was being done by the angel was real. In other words, he thought he was having a dream. He thought he was having a vision. He wasn't even sure this was really happening. And when they had passed the first and second guard, they came to the iron gate that leads into the city, which opened up for them by itself. And they went out along one street, and immediately the angel departed from him. Now, the first question that came up for me, or one of the questions that came up for me, was, why did God go through all this theater? Why did God have an angel show up and get him unshackled and have him get dressed and walk him through the chambers of the prison back out onto the street? I mean, we remember Philip, right, on the road, and he came across the eunuch, and once he baptized the eunuch, boom, God just transported him right there. Why didn't God do that now? Why did he go through all these theatrics? Well, I think that's because God had a purpose and a reason for doing it that way. In my 30 years of walking with the Lord, I've noticed that when God does something, he seems to do a lot of things at the same time. He will speak to one person, and then he will show someone else something, and they will tell a third person what had happened, and they will witness to somebody else, and somebody else will get a welling up of faith in them and come to the Lord. And things happen. God does things in ways that we don't always see the logic behind them, but he does, because his ways are better than our ways, and his ways are higher than our ways, right? So going through all this theater, why did God do that? Starting with verse 11. And when Peter came to himself, he said, "Now I know for sure that the Lord has sent forth his angel and rescued me from the hand of Herod and from all that the Jewish people were expecting." In other words, all of a sudden he goes, I'm not having a dream. I'm not having a vision. This is really happening. And he didn't even come to that reality until he got outside. Right, Luke? Yeah. Okay. And when he realized this, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, who is also called Mark. You talked about the Gospel of Mark. That's who we're talking about. his mom, where many were gathered together and were praying. And they were, because they'd been praying for him. And when he knocked at the door of the gate, a servant girl named Rhoda came to answer. So she's a slave girl, a servant girl. She came to answer the outside gate. And when she recognized Peter's voice because of her joy, she did not open the gate, but ran in and announced that Peter was standing in front of the gate. In other words, she was so excited, she forgot to even let him in. She's like, dude, he's at the gate, this guy, And they said to her, you are out of your mind. I mean, they knew he was in prison, so you're out of your mind. But she kept insisting that it was so and kept saying, it is his angel. See, now back then, a common belief, and I know that sometimes we see it in the movies and people talk about it now, common belief then is every person has a guardian angel. How many people have heard of somebody having a guardian angel, right? And, which is not biblical, by the way. So, they think that the guardian angel shows up once the person is dead. So they think that's what's happening here. But Peter continued knocking, and when they opened the door, they saw him and were amazed. But motioning to them with his hand to be silent, he described to them how the Lord had led him out of the prison, and he said, report these things to James and to the brethren. See, God wanted him to have that whole story of how he delivered it. He wanted them to know exactly, step by step, how God had done this with an angel. How God had been faithful and had delivered him out of prison. And why would he do that? Because it builds their faith. Then they can say, wow, I heard straight from Peter's mouth how God walked him literally out of the prison, didn't wake up the guards, opened up the gates, and the angel led him all the way out onto the street. I heard Peter say this. That increases people's faith in God, doesn't it? It's a first-hand testimony of what God had done for him, and a second-hand testimony. And he departed and went to another place. In other words, he got out of town. He wasn't going to be a braggart about, I'm out of jail, ha ha ha, look at me. No, because he knew that Herod could send some soldiers right again and pick him right back up again, didn't he? Now when day came, in other words, in the morning, there was no small disturbance among the soldiers. In other words, all of a sudden these soldiers looked around and they go, where's Peter? Well, I thought you had him. No, I thought you had him. Well, I thought you had him. No, didn't you see him? No, I didn't see him. Where is he? And so you got to understand, back in this time, if you had a prisoner and you let that prisoner escape, then you had to do his time. And since he was going to kill Peter, that means now Herod's going to kill these soldiers. You let him get away, man, you got to do the time. There's a tradition, and it's not always followed nowadays in the military. If someone comes to pick up a prisoner from civilian authorities, say somebody's AWOL or something like that, and they pick them up and they're going to, take them back to their base. Luke, it's not that kind of church, dude. No, I'm just teasing you. Then you've got to do the time. If the prisoner you were guarding had to do 6 months and you let that prisoner escape, you've got to do the 6 months. Which makes the people guarding you real careful about you not escaping. And they do that so people don't so other soldiers just don't have pity on you and say, okay, I'm going to turn my head and you just walk away. Well, it's the same thing here, except, they killed him. 4 squads, all the ones guarding the gate, and the 2 soldiers that were shackled to him. Herod killed all of them because they were responsible for Peter. Now when the day came, there was no small disturbance among the soldiers as to what could have become of Peter. And when Herod had searched for him and had not found him, he examined the guards. In other words, he questioned the guards and ordered that they be led away to execution. And he, meaning Peter, and he, meaning Herod, went down from Judea to Caesarea and was spending time there. In other words, he kind of lost face, didn't he? Here he was going to be this big hero in front of the Jewish people, and he was going to execute Peter, and all of a sudden Peter's nowhere to be found. So he thinks, well, you know, maybe it's time for me to move on to the next town and be a big shot there, right? Because I've kind of got egg on my face here. And we're still talking about Herod Agrippa. And now he was very angry with the people of Tyre and of Sidon. And with one accord they came to him, and having won over Blastus, the king's chamberlain, in other words, the officer of the king, the guy who speaks for the king, right, being Herod, and were asking for peace because their country was fed by the king's country. In other words, there was hard times in the land, and the food and the stuff that they were getting from Herod's home turf, home country, and Herod was angry with them. So, you know, he's probably not sending a lot of food and stuff down there to him. And he can do worse if he so desires, because he's the king. And on an appointed day, Herod, having put on his royal apparel, took a seat at the rostrum and began delivering an address to them. In other words, he put on his royal apparel. His royal apparel had silver woven into it. So when he would sit in the sun, he would sparkle and he would shine. And he would sit on his judgment seat, his rostrum, his judgment seat. In other words, that's his throne of power. And the people kept crying out, "The voice of a god, not a man." In other words, they were lifting him up and calling Herod Agrippa a god. You know, they were just really trying to kiss up to him any way they could, because, you know, they wanted food and they wanted his favor. And immediately an angel of the Lord struck him, meaning Herod Agrippa, because he did not give God the glory, and he was eaten up by worms and died. Now, when they say eaten up by worms and died, history's not real clear whether he had like appendicitis, he had parasites. We're not real sure, but we are sure that God said, "Dude, you're dead." You know, the angel goes, "That's it." Right? Maybe it happened immediately. Maybe it happened over a couple days. We don't know. If it was appendicitis, it could have been immediately. But the word of the Lord continued to grow and be multiplied. In other words, here was Herod Agrippa, who was the big shot, and God just goes, "Dude, you're dead." But the people who were following the teachings of Jesus continued to grow, continued to multiply, continued to get stronger, didn't they? So what do we learn from all of this? One, that our prayers have power. He said that all the people were gathered together and they were praying for Peter's release. And God granted those prayers. He answered that prayer. And he released him. And not only did he do that, he did it in a major way, where Peter can come back and tell everybody how he did it. Now, the other question that rose up for me is, you know, James was put to death. Why didn't God save James? Could have. But he did save Peter. So the only conclusion I can come to is Peter had done what God had sent, or James had done what God had sent him to do. And it was time for him to go home. You know, it's just like us. You know, I mean, recently we had the, I need to get some more core here. We had the Prime Minister of Japan, who'd been a Prime Minister there for a long time, who was well loved by the people. And this one guy had a problem with him and he assassinated him. Why did God allow that to happen? I don't know. I'm assuming because he had done everything God had called him to do in his lifetime. Because apparently he was a good man. Apparently the people really loved him. Yeah, short tent, bro. Well, same thing with James. It was just James's time. You know, he says our days are numbered. Only God knows the number of our days. That's why we're not to worry about it. When our day comes, our day will come. And there's nothing to do about it. You may die quietly in your sleep. You may be in a plane crash. You may get hit over the head. But when your day comes, your day comes. And there's nothing you can do about it. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. There's nothing you can do about it. So we're to live every day the best we can, aren't we? The best we can. Serving God the best we can. Hey, brother, we'll get somebody to help serve you over there. Thanks, Carol. So God answers prayers. God knows the numbers of our days. He knows the hairs of our head. Even though some of us are getting fewer and fewer hairs every day. So we're to have faith in His plans, aren't we? We're to have faith in His plan and not worry about things. He tells us directly, do not worry. Do not worry. He tells us several places in the Bible, don't worry. Live your life as best you can. Live your life in such a way that it glorifies God. And we as the church, when we pray for people, God answers those prayers. Sometimes we get the answer we want, sometimes we don't, but He answers those prayers. So we, being the church, the same as those people that were praying for people, we're the church. And we're to pray for each other. We're to care for each other. We're to love on each other. We're to feed each other. That's our job. That's our job, is to care for each other. To be family to one another. That doesn't mean there aren't going to be days when you have arguments with each other, because there are. I had an argument with somebody today. But we're to care for each other. We're to pray for each other. You know, we're out here doing church, once a week. Sometimes I come out here during the week. But, you guys live out here. You guys need to be the church to each other every day. You need to be loving on each other every day. Praying for each other every day. That's our job. That's our calling. People go, I don't know what my calling is in life. The first calling is to pray for each other and to care for each other. Everything else happens after that. First, we follow Jesus. Second, we care for each other. And then everything else comes after that. And He provides for us. So we need to be the church. We need to be the church for each other. To be loving on each other. Caring for each other. When you see somebody in need, don't just walk by them. Hey man, how you doing? Look like you use a drink of water or something, you know? How you doing? Hey, bro. How's it going? Hey, Darwin. So we need to be caring for each other. I want you guys to be thinking about that this week. What? So we're going to do a couple things here. One of the ways that we care for each other is we pray for each other. Now I know some of you guys know Goyo. And Goyo sent me a message today saying that his leg has been hurting all day or all